happy to be joined this morning by Brogan MacDonald from Ramble, Laura Barron from Purcell, and Kirsty Castles from Creative Castles, it's right there. So we're going to have a conversation a little bit about the skills transition, which is something that is often talked about, but maybe a bit surface-wise. So we're going to spend some time getting under the skin of that. And Katrina, I think we've probably got a kick-off question for these guys to get us moving. Oh yes, and you will be able to use the Slido to get your questions flowing in as well, but we're just going to have a bit of a chat first.
Yeah, I think first of all, we'd like to hear just a quick 2-minute introduction from each of you.
Okay, hi everyone, it's lovely to be here. My name is Brogan MacDonald. I am a chartered structural engineer and chartered environmentalist, and I'm currently head of sustainability in building structures in Ramble. So Ramble's a global multidisciplinary design and engineering company. And I'm here talking because I've made that transition from a structural engineer who's worked in design and on site to doing a sustainability leadership role. And I'm currently about 15 years younger than all the other leadership team in my company. And that's really tricky. I
thought she was going to say I'm about 15 years younger than this lot.
No. 15 years than the leadership team at Ramble. And that's been a really interesting learning experience for me. And my mission in my role is to upskill our team of about 200 engineers in UK and India to all be internal sustainability advocates. Because I don't believe that we should be currently doing what is happening in some organisations where engineers and designers feel that they need to become LCA practitioners to make a difference. Everyone can make that difference. And I'm also extremely passionate about women in STEM and sort of doing lots of STEM engagement, going to talk to schools and having about 90% of the children falling asleep and only a few actually really caring. I thought, I'm not sure if this is the right way to go. And I personally didn't have the benefit of having people coming into my schools. I went to a pretty okay/rough school in Aberdeenshire. And I didn't have that, so I thought, how can I reach those young girls? So about 3.5 years ago, I started a TikTok account called Brogan the Engineer, and that started from me working on site, showing young girls that people like me work on site, and showing them the kind of day-to-day things that I was doing as a structural engineer. That evolved. I moved to Singapore, worked in Singapore for a bit. That evolved about being what's like an engineer abroad, and now it's evolved to what does it look like to be a sustainability leader. So I'm really passionate about showing young girls and women that, being an engineer doesn't look like X, Y, Z. And I think we're going to talk about that a lot as well. And I'm really excited.
Get followed, Brogan the Engineer.
Okay, I'll go next. Okay, so hi, I'm Laura Barron. I'm head of sustainability at an organisation called Purcell. I'm also a qualified architect. So Purcell are primarily heritage architects. We also have a team of heritage consultants and building surveyors. So again, kind of multidisciplinary, but very much working in spaces like this. We're not working here, but would love to. But these kind of very precious and important cultural buildings that have that kind of heritage importance. And so my background isn't in heritage, funnily enough. I kind of qualified as an architect and worked in new build housing for a while, and then kind of got quite disillusioned with the negative social and environmental impacts that our industry were having. A lot of that's already been kind of talked about, and really wanted to make the transition to working with an organisation that focused on existing buildings. And what I've found since joining the world of heritage and being in this intersection between conservation, which is kind of primarily what you all think of as thinking about the past and preserving the past, and sustainability, which is very much future thinking, and kind of experiencing and enjoying the tensions between those two things, that it's not always easy to kind of transform an existing heritage building that we think is important and is listed for that reason to how can we adapt them, and how can we make sure that they're continued to be enjoyed and important to us for future generations. And I think that the two are so intrinsically and importantly interconnected. And what I found when I talk to a lot of my colleagues and a lot of our clients who are owners and occupiers of listed buildings is that we already have quite a good knowledge and understanding of how we look after existing buildings. And that's such an important part of how we move forward. There's a kind of a lot of the values and the skills that we already have, particularly in the conservation sector, in how we can reuse materials, how we can be imaginative about the spaces that already exist. And one of the things that I find most interesting is how we value spaces. So the value of this building doesn't come from somebody deciding it has £1 per square metre rental value. It's value to the community and how it's evolved over time, how the spaces have been used over time. And I think that learning from how we think about our existing buildings and that are precious to us can inform how we treat all our existing buildings.
Thank you. Kirsty?
Oh yeah, I have to help me. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I think so.
My name is Kirsty Castles. I think I'm going to make a career out of skills transitions. It's my aim. I'm going to try and do as many different job roles as I can. So it is sort of succinctly as I can. I studied architecture. I did the job of worked in architecture for over 10 years. I went and studied at Centre for Alternative Technology. And
yeah. How many CAT alumni
yes.
are in the room? Let's see.
Hey.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, which is very specifically on sustainable, community-related, hands-on building, natural building materials. So I went down the natural building materials route for a while. I got really involved in actually learning trade skills, and I wanted to learn how to build. So then I got into building, traditional oak timber framing, masonry, that kind of thing, which led to a bit of a career change to start teaching building skills. So I taught building skills to unskilled people primarily, but groups of women, ex-offenders, children. That was really good fun. But I realised I was teaching and generally speaking to designers and teaching designers how to build so that they had a better concept of it. And I've transitioned since into the heritage and conservation sector, which now involves me teaching a lot of builders how to design. And so I feel like my role in BestFest this year is to represent the trades and represent craftspeople and how they have all of the knowledge and experience of buildings, of existing buildings, of their materials, of each other's materials and skill sets, and how they're not listened to. And so I kind of represent, I guess, the full scale. I can go from being the designer and the highbrow, this is how we could do it, to the on the ground, these are the challenges of how it's not happening. And that's, I guess, why I'm on the stage.
Yeah, and also, let's just see here, the jumper says building castles. You've transitioned from when we knew you as from creative castles to building castles, but I love that, building castles.
Well, I had to use it because I'm now working on a castle, so it just feels like really
by
relevant
name,
name.
by nature, in practice.
Yeah. We've got, if you have a question for the panel, scan the QR code, but just keeping to each of you have each individual ways in which you've kind of come in and skills are important to you. How do we encourage change in terms of upskilling to meet diverse needs? So Kirsty, you've talked on that, mentioned that. Brogan, we've talked this morning around people already have good existing knowledge. How do we build on it, or what should we be thinking about?
Okay, so we were talking a little bit about this last night, and I think I find a lot of, because most of my colleagues are architects, and a lot of the conversations I have are with architects and designers, and I think that I certainly find that architects are really busy, they're really stressed, there's already lots of things that we need to know, lots of liabilities and insurance, all of these different regulations, and so adding an extra layer I find is often very overwhelming for a lot of my colleagues, particularly younger ones. And I think what I try to do is have conversations with them around what they are good at, what they are interested in, what drives them, and then kind of almost trying to tease out what their superpower could be in relation to this. So it's not necessarily, you don't have to go and learn everything about the new net zero carbon building standard. I'll try and understand that and help you. But what can you do that you're already doing really well, that you already enjoy, and how can you calibrate that? I think a lot of architects already think in systems, they already kind of understand that concept. If you move a column, you know that it's changing the spatial organisation, you know it's impacting service runs. And so it's just kind of expanding and using that, pointing out that they already have these really valuable skills and helping them build on it and expand it.
Yeah, I think that one of the questions that came up in Duncan's talk was around that, which was like, how do you convince, I think the question was local authorities, but actually it's how do you convince anyone? How do you convince your clients? How do you convince your colleagues? How do you convince the trades? I think that if you know, like, anything about anything, if you've gone away today and you learn stuff, or you have a passion about it, like you're saying, you're trying to take the bigger picture and take little chunks, little bite-sized chunks, and then feed it to the people that need it. I think we all have the experience and knowledge to be able to affect change. I hope everybody in the room from this poll this morning, which says that you do think you have agency in your current role, I think it's about how do we teach people and how do you pass on that information and make it less scary and intimidating.
I was going to ask the question around something that comes up a lot in the skills conversation. So depending on what report you might read, there'll be some statement that will say we need 250,000 people into the skills space to meet the needs of the just transition. We need, the net zero just transition, or we need 500,000, it depends on that. And to some degree, I feel like sometimes the conversation gets hooked on that number as if there's going to be some, just conveyor belt of people arriving in ready to do a thing. And I don't know, where is that also coming from? And I don't think quite enough has been talked about in terms of the fact that we are in the transition now. This is the transition. We're in it. Like, for all intents and purposes, it is 2030. You know what I mean? We are like knee deep in it now. And I think really the thing that comes up time and again, and I know I've chewed Douglas's ear off about this so much, but is the difference between being qualified and qualifications and identifying those, and being competent. And I think, I'd really love to hear a little bit more about what your views are on the pathways to qualifications to address some of these things. And I don't want to say versus competence, because I don't want to pit them against each other, but there is that competence gap which seems to exist a lot. And I don't know if you've got any thoughts on that, or whether you... she's like, hold my beer. Or my coffee. It's a bit early. Okay.
Hold my drill.
Hold my drill. That's better.
There's actually quite a lot of really good courses out there to upskill current tradespeople. What I've found is that the confidence level, and this is like such a system, like this is the absolute beginning of it all. And then we spoke about this, I'm sure, in several conversations with different people. Trades being seen as coming out of school as the people that weren't academic. That's the first problem. So trades not being encouraged. It's not a celebrated professional career route in this country. It is in other countries. In Europe they have journeymen. They have great pride in their apprenticeships. In New Zealand and Australia, they take their apprenticeships quite seriously. In the UK, the trades are still seen as like the kind of the thing you do when you leave school early. So that's the first problem. And then the second problem is with that comes this like inherent, we're not the ones that make the decisions, we're not confident in our skill set. I know how to do that, and I turn up for my work, I do my work, and I go home. So I come across people that I work with on a daily basis that are very skilled and could turn that skill to many other things. And I try and give them the opportunity, and it's the insecurity and the non-confidence, which is disheartening to watch, because we could send them on quite a few courses that exist that I could rattle off the top of my head in the UK, where they'd be upskilling to use clay plasters or lime plasters, or they'd be going to learn, if they're joiners, they'd go to be learning like how to reuse wood in different ways, or even just like the mentality of reusing rather than building from new. So there's a lot.
Just on the plasters bit, where's Gavin Johnson? I was just thinking about the experience that we had. I've said this too much already, but getting your hands dirty on a bit of training, and some of our exhibitors here today, in fact, if you go up there after the break, you can actually have a go at some of the like hands-on training bit, but it is so much fun as well. It is so much fun to be able to get your hands dirty. And it does build confidence, because then you join the dots in your head and go, oh, right, that's this, that's what's happening.
And a lot of the natural building sector came from people who wanted to get their hands dirty, really enjoyed it, like got hands on, but the problem there is that they're not qualified, so they don't feel like they have the apprenticeship, the qualifications, the kind of like their time served. So it's trying to merge those two as well, in those two sectors.
When we spoke on the briefing call, you were talking a little bit as well around people who are already in the industry but making different choices about what they're willing to work on from that sort of ethical perspective. I don't know if you wanted to expand a bit on that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm very fortunate to work in a foundation-owned company. Ramble's one is the largest private foundation-owned company in Europe. And that was a very purposeful decision on my part, because it aligns with my values. And I think that many people that join similar organisations, particularly foundation-owned, have those values. We have really kind of tight ethical procedures on the projects that we work on and won't, and have come out of projects that just don't align with our values. But we're seeing the next generation of practitioners coming in that don't want to work on what was typically these sexy high-rise tall buildings. They want to work on the Paisley town halls. And because they want to work on projects that make a difference. And that's really interesting from a foundation-owned company, but also from a company that still has to make money. And a lot of businesses, these big sexy projects are the ones that make money. So where does that put those projects that necessarily don't have that kind of making a difference element to it? And that's something that I'm grappling with our leadership team, and not just in structures or in buildings, but globally. What are we going to do with these projects? Because some people still believe that they're needed to make money. There's the argument, if we don't do it, someone else will, which I'm just not on that. I don't really subscribe to that train of thought, because the only way that businesses will make a difference is through the people and the agency of the people. Businesses are not robots, they're run by people. We are the people that make that change. And talking to our next generation, saying that they don't want to work on those projects, allows me to then filter that up to the leadership team, saying, I don't think we should do this. And we had a project that involved demolition, and the client wasn't willing to look at reuse and said, we shouldn't be doing this. Our team shouldn't be doing this. And I think that internal revolution is really, really powerful. And I just hope that other businesses give that agency to the people and psychological safety, so that they can feel that they can speak up. And I think there's a question of, and if you feel that you can't, should you be there? And I'm sure there's many people, everyone in this room really cares, that's why you're here. Because if we make that change and we make that personal decision either to speak up or to move on or to do whatever you want, then that's the change that's going to happen.
Yeah, I'm just, the top two questions there, been jumping back and forth, but we're going to go with Lindsay's one, which is, I think, is a fantastic question. When we are inspiring the next generation about possibilities of built environment career, how can we also change the mindsets of parents and teachers?
Have you got children? They're very stubborn when they decide what they want to do.
Yeah. Laura, have you come across, I feel like we've had like a little bit of chat about this kind of thing before as well, tied to the next question around convincing people to join the industry, but how do we change the industry to make it enticing and make people want to join?
I think it's about how we talk about it, because when you think about the people who you talk about people who are involved in the built environment, that's everybody. Every single person is involved in the built environment, because everybody lives somewhere, works somewhere, travels between different places and goes and, we spend 80% of our life, 90% of our life indoors. And so it's how we frame it and make it meaningful and important for people and inspiring. And I think tying your experience of buildings and getting people to think about things in terms of their health and well-being and all of these other kind of really important issues that are interconnected with carbon emissions and cost of living and all of those other things, and really help explain to people the importance of it and in a language that they can understand. Like, if you're retrofitting your home, you will be warmer and healthier, and it'll be more enjoyable, and your bills will go down, and putting it in a language that people can kind of understand, and then the skills associated with how you get there, what what routes there are and kind of what passages there are to help people understand that. There was another question I was going to jump on as well, because there was it was about inspiring young people. It's gone now.
It might come back up. Everybody's decided that they're like happy. Look, you see all the upvotes. Everybody's.
I know, it's quite.
But I think what you're saying is interesting. So we spent a lot of time in retrofit recently talking about the fact that the definition of retrofit is a little narrow, right? It's focused on reducing carbon emissions, saving bills, like cost savings and bill savings, things like that. Whereas we need to be fully wrapping into that conversation better health outcomes, happiness, like contentedness in your community, like having there's more to it than that. And I think if we could extend that conversation, not to start at the process of should you, shouldn't you retrofit because these are the outcomes, but also like to talk about the aspiration of what you can be involved in the delivery of as a career, as a participant, as somebody getting involved in it, and expanding those two might actually help, like, just get some of that acceleration of like the culture change around what it is as well. Because if we just talk about like, oh, we want to deliver these better outcomes, but we're still just going to go from the point blank of business as usual with procurement and skills, then what's the point? We're only kind of going halfway. Yeah. So I think that's really interesting.
I guess there's two sides to that. One is that I don't think that parents, teachers, and even students understand how much change is available there. The built environment is one of the most damaging industries. And 40% of global emissions, 50% of extracted natural materials, we have that. It's a horrible stat, but we have the power to really change that. And that change is far lesser in many other industries like fashion or agriculture and things. So sometimes reinforcing that actually, we have that agency, which is really exciting and powerful, is great. And then the other hand, I guess that's on the kind of advocacy and maybe designer side. On the other hand, I've been a woman on site, 1 woman, 200 men. It's difficult, and I'm going to be honest, it's not nice.
No.
And that's one of the reasons that I'm much happier working in an office, a designer environment, because it's just safer. It's happier. I have less anxiety. And but don't get me wrong, I didn't just leave without trying to do things. Working in these big commercial...
It shouldn't even be a thing, though. Sorry, I'm just thinking there for a minute. I'm like, it was really awful, horrible environment. I felt quite threatened. But you know what? I really tried. Like, I really tried. It's sort of... But, I mean, I would like people in the room to reflect on this. And I think, I was toying between, do I wear my Solidarity t-shirt today or do I wear my Girls Just Want to Have Fundamental Rights t-shirt, right? Because, actually, I think there's something really important about this. And we need, whether we like it or not, we need the men folk in the room to be the ones out in the streets who are saying, like... Yeah, actually, can we come together? Because I know all of you are like, well, it's not us and it's not these men in the room, but you need to tell the other men who might have your ears that actually we'd really like it if it wasn't like, continually pointed out like, oh, look, you're the anomaly on site. Like, we're friendly, or even worse, what the opposite could be. Yeah. So I think that we do need to be actively involved in making spaces safer.
Yeah. I think that comes down to who's being supported and who's supporting. Yeah, everybody, within.
And there are really great examples of contractors and of other sort of supply chain sides who are leading on that and who are fundamentally trying to tip the scales to a more balanced scenario. But it really needs to be happening much, much more.
Yeah, and like the whole, the toilet situation, we don't need to reflect on, having to ask for keys. I've done it all. And I made a big thing about it before I left, but I was like, ultimately, I'm not going to sit and be unhappy trying to make this change. It's so much better to put my energy elsewhere. But there's a lot to be said, and women in construction, after the middle level, is the highest drop-off of any single industry. So, why is that happening? I'm sure you've got your own conclusions of that.
They used to say this about architecture. They used to say that I don't know if it's changed, it's been a while since I've been in but they used to say that in education and academics it was 50-50 female and male, and then it dropped significantly in practice as something like 80% male and 20% female. And I used to always be curious about the reason why. And
Shared parental leave.
well,
That's actually paid.
Well, no, because I actually personally think there's this question here as an architect undergrad student, do we need more architects, and is now the time to postgrad in a different direction? This could be a total generalisation, but I just think that females that studied architecture tend to still, it's not like they drop out because they had kids. I think they just go and find a slightly more applicable job for their skill set. They go and they find things that interest them, and whereas, and this could be a generalisation, please don't kill me, but I have, my experience is that men that want to go and study architecture want to be an architect. And they're very driven, and that's what they're going to do, and they will go and do that.
Okay, but I think this is an interesting thing to get into. I studied architecture because I wanted to be an architect, and then I went into big practice architecture, and that was awful. It was horrible. And I stayed at it for a long time. And I actually just want to give a little call out to another thing that that Charlie is involved in, campaigning around better conditions in architecture. There is actually a union for architectural workers now as well, and all these things are really crucially important to enable those things. You are like an architect, you're an architectural worker. It's not like we were sold these lofty ideas of what it is to be an architect, and then we're like, yeah, and if you wouldn't mind just working there for 80 hours a week and just sign this directive here so you don't actually get to have overtime and all of those things, it's not a nice
and this ties back into the question of how do you entice but how do you entice young people to get into the built environment, and how do you convince their teachers and parents? Because from an outsider's perspective that doesn't work in the built environment, architects are, generally speaking, well paid, professionals.
Creative.
Hands up the well-paid architects in the room.
They're overworked, they're not achieving what they set out to do. They wanted to be, the designers of these beautiful structures, and they're actually dealing with paperwork and emails 24/7. I don't think that it's sold. I don't think any job in the built environment is particularly sold to the general public, and it's the general public that you have to kind of teach what the job roles are in order for the teachers to then know about it, in order for the children to then know about it, and the parents to know about it. So
That's why we need more role models like you.
yeah, glamorous assistants showing.
Yeah, and part of it is trying to make a decision about the rest of your life when you're 18, isn't it? You're kind of trying
be many things at different times.
But then, and that comes back round to is the built environment and the jobs within it open to skill transitions, right? So full circle, can everyone raise their hand? Did you start out in the built environment construction industry? Raise your hand if you're still in it. And now, can you raise your hand if you transitioned into the construction industry or built environment? See, that's a good statistic, right? So I want to ask you all how.
You can have that conversation at the coffee break.
Well, we have a look at some of the other questions. So what lessons can we learn from other sectors that have gone through major skills transitions like renewable energy or digital technology? Brogan?
I don't know whether there's anything to be, maybe it's a bit of a slightly pessimistic view of, I'm not sure if we've done them well, but something that's really been ground in my gears, I work a lot in embodied carbon. I'm very passionate about climate justice and transition in these lower carbon solutions, because we simply don't have enough of the solutions available and everyone wants a piece of them. And we heard the news earlier this year that Port Talbot and Scunthorpe blast furnaces and steelworks are going to be shutting down and being replacing with electric arc furnaces, which is fantastic for the UK in terms of our carbon budget. However, if you're interested in knowing why it's a big problem, then follow me on LinkedIn because I talk about it a lot. But we've now got thousands of people that are going to become unemployed, and we are repeating a similar thing that happened, many moons ago. Why is the government not becoming proactive to put that into skills that we do need? Retrofitting homes. We don't have that skills available. We have these people available to be, going into these other sectors. Instead, we're going to be ruining the livelihoods and towns of these steel making, because it's not just the people that work in the steel mills, it's the businesses that provide them food, it's the businesses that do the transportation. We're going to be absolutely devastating impacts as a result of this transition that hasn't been just at all. So
You mentioned government, but is there any other levers
Yeah,
that we
Laura,
can think about?
I'm wondering about in your specific area of focus, what are you seeing change coming through in the people who are, in the types of skills and the types of people who are working on some of the projects, like similar to the thing that you're seeing here, or are you experiencing that change?
Well, I guess there's conservation skills are kind of, they've got a whole load of issues of their own in terms of shortages and like loss of craftsmanship and that the value of those really, really difficult, really worthy roles. So again, it's kind of not necessarily a positive response, but I think the key there is that it is directly transferable into what we need to do. So the people that have been looking after older buildings for centuries, really successfully, have the keys to looking after all our built assets. And I think the things that it's not necessarily a skill, but it's a kind of practice of just good maintenance, of like looking after our buildings. You know, listed buildings have conservation management plans that tell you exactly when you need to repair things and how you should do it, and keep on top of it to help prolong their life for as long as possible. Whereas we don't do that with new buildings in the same way, and we don't kind of, you know, I'm a homeowner and I don't clear out my gutters, but I tell crowds of people to clear out their gutters. But it's that kind of I know it's gone off topic a bit, but
I think
I wanted to talk about maintenance.
That's exactly.
But no, it's on topic because that comes back to what you were saying, which was that retrofit is not just this part. It's almost like you have to get general people to realise that the building that you live in or work in requires maintenance, and you should know how to do certain things because it's not just been built for you to occupy and then go away.
Like you do with your car.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
But you must find that a lot as well. And like, sorry to come back to the conservation bit, but like, surely so much of the first stage of your assessment of any project is like, why haven't you been looking after this building?
budget
Money.
often, yeah. But I think like going to right at the beginning of the project, I think that's the other thing that we do well, is like really understanding what you've got and what the value of what you've got is, and thinking about that not just in terms of the area of the site and how much you could get by building something new on it. It's the doing a really forensic understanding of what the materials you've got, how they could be reused, and how the spaces could be adapted for a new use, and not kind of trying to impose something that it isn't going to work in that kind of building. You're a bit more forgiving of.
I think we'll question for all of you, and we'll take the bottom one. What's the most challenging thing you've come across as a young leader?
I love this because we were kind of speaking about this. We were kind of speaking about this last night at dinner, and there's two things for me as ageism, and normally that's kind of like the reverse. It's like, you know, we underestimate the older workforce and what they're capable of, but actually I get underestimated all the time, which I'm now starting to find quite interesting and funny, because she's really young, she's not going to do anything. And I've made more change in my organisation in 1 year than some more senior directors have in 10, and I'm really proud of that. And I guess it's because I've got the tenacity and passion that I've not been bogged down by the numbers and the middle management and the you can'ts that maybe they have, and I've just come in, you know, straight from practice into this, being like, why can't we do it? And I'm doing a bit of a toddler thing, you know, when toddlers go, why, and I'm like, I do that, or I go, why not? And half the time the answer is, don't know. I'm like, well, let's do it anyway. So that's one thing. And the other interesting thing that we were speaking about last night is when you're a minority at a table, women often try and become like this macho male archetype in leadership. And I have a few power suits for events, and I was reflecting on why I felt like I need to have them. They're all colourful and I love them. But is it because I have to feel like I'm more powerful to fit in? And we embody this, like if we can shout louder, if we get in with the guys. And when I worked in construction, I tried to be like one of the lads. And I've really been embedding more of like the divine feminine energy in with me, and the emotional side, and letting that be, and not having to try and morph myself into this person that I'm not.
Thank you.
And actually, it's got me more. And I've managed to make more change. And actually, rather than trying to be more men, they should be more us.
Yeah.
I follow that. I don't think I can, but I've cried in front of a lot of our partners. It's kind of, I've just completely embraced that whole emotional side now. But I think the thing that I've struggled with the most is coming to terms with the fact that not everybody agrees with me. And that's the biggest challenge, is that not everybody sees the world through my eyes, and kind of meeting people where they are, and not in a manipulative way, but in a kind of persuasive way, and trying to understand what their angle is and why they're feeling the way that they feel, and trying to be on a level with that, and not just kind of saying, I don't understand why you're not hysterical about what's happening to the world with everybody, because they don't think in the same way that I do. I think that's my biggest challenge, but I'm working on it.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I like that.
I mean, yeah. Similar, it's, what was the question?
What is your
Like the most
challenge as
challenging
being a
thing
young
about me.
leader?
Yeah,
as a young
and
leader.
I feel that it's just a pretty personal thing, isn't it? But there's overarching topics. So I guess my current job is the most challenging job I've ever done, because I am the sole female in a very male-dominated specific role. And I'll tell the story I told you last night, which is it's a three-headed thing. There's the principal contractor, there's the client, both male, and there's me, and I'm like the kind of client agent. We had to have a proper chat about like our differences and how we see things, sometimes completely from the different perspective, for whether that's management styles or like approach to the design and construction. And our principal contractor said to me, could you be a little bit less emotional sometimes? And what I explained last night was that my initial reaction was like, yeah, do you know what, I've been trying to work on that. Like, yeah, like, I'm not good at confrontation. I'm going to work on that. And our client, who's, you know, in his 60s, had a great career, got a massive family, you know, learning lots of himself, he stepped in and he said, actually, mate, I think you need to man up and deal with the fact she's just got emotions. I was like, oh, all right. And then he advocated that having me as a woman on the team was the best part about the project, because they should learn to be a little bit more emotional, and they should learn to express themselves more freely. So I think it seems like a very gender issue, but
well, it is until it spills out into every other impact of it. And I do know that if there's really, really significant issues of mental health crises happening across the construction industry, and if we don't like get into that narrative playoff between emotional being hysterical, which is, by the way, do some homework on where that came from, is actually not necessary or useful. And we talked yesterday about the need to allow yourself to feel vulnerable. If you can't feel what's going on and move through it maturely and get to the other side so you can leverage what the resources are that are available to you to have the impact, you're not going to have the impact you want to have. So I think do yourself a favor, not you, you're all right, you got it, but like out there, take this message out there for people to like connect with it, own it, move through it, and affect the agency you can. So thanks to our speakers.
Thank you so
very
much.